From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. The U.S. has expressed strong opposition to Israel's ongoing expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, emphasized that these settlements are undermining the prospects of a viable Palestinian state. She also says they are considered illegal under international law, violating the Fourth Geneva Convention. The U.S. envoy voiced deep concern over escalating violence perpetrated by extremist Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank. President Joe Biden has threatened to impose visa sanctions on these Israeli extremists, emphasizing the need for accountability and an end to such violence. The U.S. reaffirmed its support for a two-state solution, which would reunite Gaza and the West Bank under a single governance structure led by a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opposes the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, further complicating the path towards a peaceful resolution. The U.S. has cautioned Israel against causing significant displacement of Palestinians during its military operations in southern Gaza. The concern has stemmed from Israel recently forcing displacement in northern Gaza. Two senior American officials stressed the importance of conducting the campaign in a way that minimizes further displacement of the 2 million Palestinians currently living in southern and central Gaza. Weeks of relentless Israeli bombardment in the north have already forced many Palestinians from their homes, damaging nearly half of Gaza's housing. The Biden administration has also emphasized the need to protect UN facilities, power, water, and hospitals. While discussions between the U.S. and Israel are ongoing, establishing practical arrangements around UN facilities is being considered rather than a formal safe zone. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, is urging President Joe Biden to condemn Israel's killings of 2 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank on Wednesday. 8-year-old Adam Samir al-Ghul and 15-year-old Bassel Suleiman Abu al-Wafa were fatally shot by Israeli forces. This was during an 18-hour raid in Jenin that also saw major destruction in the city and its refugee camp. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed the children's deaths, and video of the killings has spread on social media. CAIR Executive Director Nihad Awad says Biden should condemn the killing of Palestinian children in the same way that he rightly condemns violence targeting others. Awad says the killing of Palestinian children by Israel's far-right apartheid government will continue until the decades-long dehumanization of the Palestinian people and the systematic denial of their rights by the global North comes to an end. Israeli analysts are outraged after the broadcast of a video depicting interaction between Hamas fighters and Israeli prisoners as they were handed over to Red Cross teams in Gaza. The video circulated as Israeli TV stations reported that families of Israeli prisoners claimed their loved ones were treated well during their captivity. Analysts in Israel are upset, believing the footage portrays the humanity of Hamas fighters, a view they strongly oppose. Political analyst Yaniv Peleg argues that broadcasting this footage is detrimental to Israel's image. He notes that Hamas professionally produces such footage with multiple cameras and proper lighting to portray their humanity. Some, including pro-Palestinian influencers, view these interactions as heartwarming displays of humanity by Hamas militants. However, Maya Lecker, a political analyst, points out that these gestures follow the killing of prisoners' family members, setting a low bar for humanity. Israeli Channel 13 reports that the released prisoners did not experience mistreatment, but did mention food scarcity and weight loss during captivity. Israel kept them away from the media, allowing only relatives and friends to meet them. Israeli Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir has threatened to dissolve the government if the war in Gaza is stopped. His comments coincided with reports of efforts to extend the humanitarian pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was extended on Wednesday evening, shortly before it was due to expire. According to Qatari mediators, it is to be extended by 1 day under the same conditions as the exchange for prisoners. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Gaza's government officials have appealed for help in the search and rescue of thousands of civilians who have been missing since the Israeli bombardment of Gaza began on October 7th. Head of the media office in Gaza, Ismail al-Thawabta, says civil defense teams are still recovering dozens of casualties under the rubble and on the roads from the south to the north of Gaza. He says about 6,500 people are still trapped, including more than 4,700 children and women. Equipment, machinery, and fuel are needed to reach the people under the rubble. Al-Thawabta called on the international community to intervene with heavy equipment and specialized teams to clear the rubble. Hamas has proposed a new deal for a prisoner swap, which has 4 stages. The Israel Broadcasting Authority said late Wednesday that Hamas has offered to release elderly Israeli prisoners in the initial stage, men in the second stage, female conscripts in the third stage, and soldiers in the final stage. The agreement involves the release of 10 Israeli prisoners in Gaza for each day of a new humanitarian pause. It includes the release of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel who were convicted of carrying out operations resulting in the killing of Israelis. The IBA, however, quoted an unnamed Israeli official who said Tel Aviv responded, demanding that Hamas must first release 21 women and 4 children still held by them before discussing the new agreement. Hamas denies having additional women after an expected release of a batch of prisoners late Wednesday. A Houston-based nonprofit is overseeing the expansion of Centro Islamico, America's only Latino mosque. Jamie Mujahid Fletcher is CEO and founder of the Houston-based nonprofit Islam in Spanish. He converted to Islam shortly before the 9/11 attacks and opened Centro Islamico in 2016. After raising nearly $3 million, his nonprofit is adding new facilities to the 2.5-acre property in Alif, Texas. The expansion includes a prayer area, cafe, production studio for bilingual media content, and a museum showcasing Muslim contributions in Spain. Houston's Muslim leaders applaud the initiative, which caters to the city's shifting demographics. With Latinos comprising 44.5% of the population and a growing number of Latino converts, the mosque's expansion aims to attract more followers. The U.S. is close to establishing a paperless visa system. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Visa Services, Julie Stuft, has announced that with the new system, travelers will no longer need physical visa stamps or pasted pages in passports. The transition is expected to take approximately 18 months or longer before being widely adopted. The system could require an app or a digital platform for travelers to show their visa status without paper documentation. The Court of Justice of the European Union, or CJEU, has ruled that respective public administrations can impose a ban on the wearing of religious symbols. The court ruled that a public administration may prohibit the visible wearing of signs indicating philosophical or religious beliefs in the workplace to create a completely neutral administrative environment. The court ruled on the case of a woman from the Belgian municipality of Ans who was banned from wearing a hijab at work. The court refused to classify such a rule as discriminatory if it is generally applied to everyone. The court found that the rule could be considered objectively justified by a legitimate aim. However, it emphasized that the opposite policy, allowing the wearing of religious symbols, would also be justified. It said that each member state in the EU is allowed to decide neutrality in public service workplaces depending on its own context. Amnesty International's East and Southern Africa office has called on African leaders to prioritize human rights and climate justice at the upcoming 28th UN Climate Change Summit, or COP28, in Dubai. In a statement, Amnesty International's East and Southern Africa office emphasized the need for leaders to ensure that the Loss and Damage Fund addresses the protection of human rights. The organization calls on leaders to advocate for a fair distribution of responsibilities and hold developed countries accountable for their contributions to the climate crisis. Tijer Shaguta, Amnesty International's regional director for East and Southern Africa, urged African leaders to push for grants rather than loans to alleviate the continent's debt burden and facilitate climate crisis responses. Amnesty International pointed out that the Nairobi Declaration from the inaugural Africa Climate Summit fell short in prioritizing human rights and climate justice. The rights group called on leaders to ensure concrete actions that safeguard both human rights and the environment at COP28. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.